I'm only half joking. Well, the half that's a joke is that I ever had any Ukrainian decorations up in the first place. But if I had Ukrainian decorations up, I'd have to be taking them down, and I'd have to be raising the colours of the monkeypox. I can't believe it's not butter, as they say. We've just emerged from the COVID-19 pandemic, which swept the world, which killed millions of people, and which killed our economy through the measures that were adopted to counter it. All kinds of unforeseen, at least by the authorities, consequences to the COVID-19 response are now obvious. Our economy is virtually wrecked. Millions of people are ill, and many have died because they weren't able to access our health services because of the fear of, or the inability of, the NHS to respond to their needs. Millions of cancelled operations. You still can't see your doctor in person. In most places, at least. I've been living in Scotland for a year and a half, and I have never seen my doctor. But me and the receptionist are on very good terms, at least. And they've come up with another one, the monkeypox. I mean, it looks like, I don't know, scabies. It looks like a common or garden skin, horrific but common skin eruption. And we're now being treated to exactly the same treatment that we were given in the run-up to the coronavirus pandemic. People are actually talking about vaccines, even though the vaccines that we've had are not discredited, certainly nothing like they cracked up to be. I am triple vaxxed. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. But I tell you, I'm not getting a monkeypox vaccine. And I'm not going to be locked down again. And moreover, the new World Health Organization treaty, which our countries are being invited, maybe even compelled to sign, will mean that no one country can take a different approach to the monkeypox and all subsequent poxes from any other. Our national sovereignty will have been pooled in the WHO, a heavily discredited organization led by a man with no credibility left at all. We'll be talking to James Melville, my new favourite Scotsman, a man who's risen without trace to being an absolute authority on this and other matters, on what the WHO treaty means for us and for the world. Neither was I joking when I said that just about the only people in Washington, D.C. That were not involved in Russian collusion were the Russians and Donald Trump. In the trial now unfolding in the United States, very serious allegations are being made under oath that point in the direction that not only was the whole Russiagate a hoax, a fabrication, fake from first to last, but that the author of it was Hillary Clinton, the then leader of the so-called Democratic Party and their candidate for president against Donald Trump. And still in the wings to emerge if Joe Biden trips over his dressing gown cord and chokes himself in the lavatory on one of his rushed visits. There's every possibility that Hillary Clinton is not dead, politically speaking. But the testimony given by close aides to her in court this week seems to suggest that Hillary Clinton got up the entire hoax herself. Some things are not in doubt at all. It is a matter of fact that the Hillary Clinton campaign paid for the so-called Steele dossier, which led the entire American state off on a wild goose chase at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars and total paralysis in their governmental system for at least the first half of Donald Trump's first presidency. It was all a hoax that the Democrats paid for. There was no Russian collusion. Trump was not a Manchurian candidate. The Russians did not interfere in the American elections. Now, humor me for a moment. Imagine everything I've just said there is 100% true, because it is. Just imagine the extent to which then we were all completely fooled. Indeed, people like me who were telling you that back then were called conspiracy theorists. Many of us were shadow banned, some of us banned from social media. We were told we were spreading Russian disinformation. And yet everybody now knows that what we were saying, once again, I'm afraid, was the truth. And what our enemies were saying, once again, I'm afraid, was a pack of lies. What can the United States do about this? Well, lock her up is a popular refrain, and it's never been closer. Hillary Clinton might have to go on trial for deliberately and via a conspiracy luring the FBI into a false witch hunt of the President of the United States and the officials round about him. It doesn't get much more dramatic than that. Now, as someone who cares nothing for either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, here's the one person in this story that I, myself, am worried about. Julian Assange was falsely dragged into this Russiagate affair. He was falsely accused, not least on the front page of The Guardian, and the story is still there on The Guardian's web page. He was accused of being the primary disseminator of a so-called hack at the Democrat National Committee. A hack that was not a hack but a leak, was said to be funneled through Julian Assange from Moscow and other material through Julian Assange back to Moscow. Manafort was supposedly regularly visiting Julian Assange at the Ecuador embassy in London when he never set foot in the building, and Assange never set eyes on him. This Assange linked to the Russiagate hoax was one of the prime movers of the Biden administration's frenzied attempt, to gain the extradition of Julian Assange to the United States to face charges which will mean that we will never see his face again. Mind you, the reptilian Australian Prime Minister Morrison is no more. Words I can hardly contain myself in announcing. Not that I have any faith in the so-called Australian Labour Party, but my goodness, was I happy to see the so-called Liberals, actually Conservatives, down under, go under in a big way in the elections in Australia yesterday. Albanese as he's called, Albo, the new Prime Minister of Australia, is on record when leader of the opposition, demanding Assange be released from British custody and returned to his homeland in Australia. I beg him now, on air, live up to what you said, Prime Minister-elect. and get Julian Assange out of Belmarsh. Keep Julian Assange out of the clutches of the departing government in Canberra and out of the clutches of the United States of America. The Australian government should have done much more, didn't do hardly anything at all. Now is the opportunity for new leadership in Australia, and I wish them well. Advance Australia fair. We'll be talking to a former Australian senator, Professor Steve Keen, about the Australian elections in just a minute or two. Neither was I joking that the ruble, the much reviled, the multiply sanctioned ruble, oh, if only I had any rubles, if only it was legal for me to have any rubles, I'd be laughing. And so would you, because the ruble is now in 2022 the best performing currency in the world. This is important, not just for Schadenfreude, as the Germans might put it, although forgive me a little Schadenfreude, but because our economies in Europe are heading for the tank, heading for the drain, disappearing down the drain, whilst the Russian economy and its currency are booming. Your leaders, in the actions that they have taken, have caused your prices to rise and rise and rise, your currency to fall and fall and fall. Food shortages, which the former governor of the Bank of England described as likely to be apocalyptic. Now, when a central bank governor describes something as apocalyptic, you better sit up and take notice. He predicted that food shortages and food price rises would be of an apocalyptic scale. That's what your leaders have done, whilst the Russians have not just bounced off the floor, but are going into orbit, along with the Chinese economy, with which they are now inextricably twinned, in a BRICS alliance, set to get larger, with more and more important economies joining it. The Shanghai Cooperation Trade Organization, getting larger, in which half of the people of the world live and half of the wealth in the world is reposed. They're all going from strength to strength while we are disappearing down the toilet. And it isn't just Europe, although America has made sure that Europe pays the highest price. The people of the United States, the great people of the United States, from sea to shining sea, are themselves now entering a period of deep recession, which may become a depression. What will it take, people in the West, to ask the question of those who rule them? Whose side are you actually on? Is it you that's working for the Russians? Is it you that is Putin's stooge? Are you Manchurian candidates? Because you're wrecking our society and making his society ever more successful. Time only for one other issue, though many other issues will arise in the course of the show this evening. And that is the 5th anniversary of the Manchester Arena bomb attack on the Ariana Grande concert. I was in Manchester at that time, as I often am. I was 1 mile away when the dull thud of the murderous bomb exploded amongst a huge number of young children in the arena. It was a slaughter of the innocents. It was a massacre of our children. The mass murderer, the child killer, I'm not even going to mention his name. I spit upon his memory. Doesn't need to detain us now. He's burning in the hellfires for sure, as any deliberate mass murderer of children surely is. What should detain us here is the fact that nobody has been held to account for the systematic failures of intelligence, but also of policing and of emergency response that cost lives on the night. Let me deal only with the matter of the failures of intelligence. Anyone interested in politics and in any way connected to Manchester knew that there was a ticking time bomb in the existence in the city of a cell, a large cell of the Libyan Islamic fighting group. The clue was in the name. They were deliberately sent to Manchester and kept in Manchester in a cell formation. They were paid by successive British governments, Tony Blair's, Gordon Brown's, in fact going all the way back to John Major's, as well as the Conservative governments of David Cameron and Theresa May. They were paid to be the Libyan Islamic fighting group waiting for their moment amongst the great people of the great city of Manchester. It was a time bomb that was ticking from the moment that these people were put there. The family of the mass murderer were one of the leading families in this Libyan Islamic fighting group cell. When the so-called revolution to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi, the then leader of Libya, broke out, of course there was nothing spontaneous about its breakout, when the regime change operation in Libya, led by NATO, by Sarkozy, by Cameron, and by President Barack Obama, and the NATO top brass in their defensive role as head of a defensive NATO organization, launched their regime change operation in Libya. The family of the mass murderer were in the advance guard of those conveyed by the British state to go and fight and win in Libya. And then they were permitted, with the cordite still on their hands, with the explosive residue still in their clothes, to move back and forward between the killing fields of Libya and the great city of Manchester without let or hinder. No one stood in their way. Every facilitation of their passage to and from the front line was afforded by the British state. The mass murderer himself was reported to the authorities no less than, but maybe more than, 3 times. By his school, by his mosque, the Didsbury Mosque in Manchester, and by another individual, who all reported to the special branch in Manchester that this man was a dangerous fanatic who might well cause harm to the people of Manchester, and nothing was done about it. Now look, mistakes can happen. I'm not looking to witch hunt any individual or any individual service, but I demand accountability. And so should the Manchester MPs. And so should the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham. We need to know how and why all of these blunders, disasters happened. The souls of the departed children of the Manchester Arena cry out for justice and accountability.